All right, so today we are talking about synthesizers. It's our first day of 3 on synthesizers, and I'm pretty excited to get talking about this stuff because synthesizers is one of my favorite things along with sampling. So it's a thing that I really enjoy a lot, and we're gonna have some fun today. Just going through some synths, different types of synthesizers, different types of synthesis, and showing you some different things. Now, my goal with all this is to basically get you to the point where you can pull up different synths, you can pull up different presets, and if you want to make a change to the sound somehow, that you can do that. That's my main goal. And then the secondary goal is to also get you to the point where you can make some basic synth patches yourself, and so that whatever synth you own or whatever you have, whether it's hardware or software, whatever it is, that you know at least a little bit about what's going on. I don't really expect you to be an expert after all of this. It's more about just kind of getting comfortable. So synthesizers aren't big scary things. It's not just like you're like, oh my gosh, this looks like, you know, the control room of the Starship Enterprise or something like that. It's so that you can look at it and you be confident, okay, if I turn this, this is going to happen. If I turn this, this is going to happen. Obviously, there's a lot of like exploration and trial and error that goes along with this. So you're going to have to, you know, be willing to practice, be willing to get into it yourself. But with what we talk about today, hopefully that will be a little bit easier. So I just want to show you what I've got set up here in Ableton Live. And if we look here, I've got my keyboard, I've got my push here. And then Ableton Live here has a whole bunch of different sounds set up in it. So I've got a basic modular, and I'm just going to show you what these look like real quick. I've just got a basic modular synth here. Let me go ahead and make that screen a little bit smaller so it's not super confusing. So that's what that looks like. And then we've got a modular V3, which is from Arturia. And then I've got this thing called Modulator, which I believe is a free one that's in part of the free synths email that I sent out before. I think this is one of those, and it sounds pretty good, that's why I put it in here. Then we've got the Monarch, which is part of Reactor. And then this here is the Jupiter 8 from Arturia. And then a Buchla Easel, again from Arturia. There's quite a lot of Arturia things because Arturia just recreated a bunch of synthesizers. A CS80, again from Arturia. And then I've got some modern synthesizers as well, Serum, and a really new one here that only came out less than a year ago or about a year ago called Pigments, again from Arturia. So there's some really cool stuff here. Now, some of these are in Reactor. You can see here's Reactor, and this is in Reactor right here. And then this Monarch over here is in Reactor. Reactor is a toolbox that comes with a bunch of stuff, and the free version does not include Monarch. I am going to go through some of the stuff that the free version does include. I don't have them up here initially, but we're going to go ahead and get that going. Yep, here's your mouse halo. There you go. So we're going to be talking about that in detail and going through some of the things in Reactor, and especially some of the ones that you have that come with the free version of Reactor, so you know what you can get started with. But the ones that come with Reactor, the free version, aren't great for learning about synthesizers, so we're not really going to start with those. That's why we're starting with some of these other synths, and just kind of give you an overview of how different synthesizers work and how everything we talk about today can apply to different synthesizers and different synthesis types. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is, kind of some building blocks of synthesizers and just a basic introduction. So there are basically two things that help us identify sounds, envelope and timbre. Envelope is the shape of the sound's loudness, and timbre is how bright or dark the sound is. It's kind of the harmonics of the sound. So an envelope would be something like, if we have a drum sound, it starts fast and it kind of tapers off probably very quickly. So bap. It's just a short sound. It just starts and stops. If I have a cymbal sound, it starts really suddenly and then kind of tapers off over time. And that's what the envelope tells us about different sounds. And so if you're listening to like a piano or a string or a drum sound or something like that, you can tell what it is based on the envelope of the sound. Now the other half of that equation is the harmonics of the sound, how bright it is or how dark it is. Is it a sound that's like really type of sound, type of thing, or is it a ooh type of sound? Is it really bright or is it really dark and sonorous? That's the timbre of the sound. And if you think about it, if you stop and think about it, really all the different sounds, how we identify sounds, really kind of boils down to those two things, the envelope and the timbre of the sound. Now, when we're talking about synthesizers, there's two main types of synthesizers these days. That's analog. Those are mostly like hardware. They use electricity to make the sound. And then there's digital, which are mostly software. Not all software, though. There are a lot of digital hardware synthesizers as well. So I don't want you to think about analog and digital as being hardware versus software. Analog and digital talks about how the sound is made. If it's made from electricity and like hardware pieces, then it's analog. If it's made from like microchips and math, numbers, that's digital. Analog sense, there's no analog sense inside of a computer. A computer is only digital. Even if it sounds analog, even if it's modeling analog, even if it's like supposed to sound like or recreate the sound of an old analog synth, if it comes from your computer, it is digital, it's not analog. If it comes from a hardware, however, it could be both. It could be either analog or digital. So it really depends on how the sound is made. Sounds like feedback. I don't know, Crispy. There's absolutely no reason why there would be feedback right now. So, that might be on your end. I don't know. All right. So the basic building blocks of a synthesizer. We have three main parts of a synth. We have an oscillator, a filter, and an amplifier. And these three things are like this. The oscillator creates the sound, the filter shapes the harmonic frequencies of the sound, and the amplifier shapes the loudness of the sound. So the amplifier has to do with the envelope, and the filter has to do with the harmonics, and the oscillator is actually creating the sound that it all encompasses. So we've got here, the oscillator is right here, the filter is here, and the amplifier is here, and this goes out into the speakers right here. So let me just give you an example of this. I'm going to go over here to my basic modular synth, and this is a little thing that I put together real quick in Reactor. Now this is all stuff that you actually have access to if you get the Reactor, or if you get Contact, what's it called? It's called Contact Start, or Complete Start. Complete Start comes with a variety of things just to kind of get you going, just some basics to kind of, it's kind of the gateway drug to kind of get you hooked on the the complete sound from Native Instruments. And right here what we have is a little thing I put together here, just got an oscillator, a filter, and an amplifier here. And if I play this, got a little minor scale there. Okay, let me get the keyboard down in the corner there. There we go. Just make sure that's what we're looking at. Cool. So this here is a basic synthesizer. And what we're looking at, let me just go ahead and zoom in on this. Over here, I've got my note in. So when I play notes, you can see that light flashes there. And that just gets it so that information from my keyboard here, which is my push in this case, the information from my keyboard gets into the synthesizer itself. So, and we're going to talk about what each one of these things means here in just a minute. But first of all, I've got the oscillator here, and the oscillator has octaves here, so I can adjust the pitch. And then down here, it's got my waveform type. And there's different types of waveforms. This is the sine wave. The sine wave is the most fundamental waveform of all. If I change this, if I click and drag it, you can see the sound changes, or you can hear it. You can also see it right here. So you can see it goes through all these, and if we listen to it, All right, and that's what it sounds like if I scroll through all the sounds. I'm not going to go through all the sounds, all the different parts right now, just because it would get kind of annoying just hearing that steady tone. But if you look over here in my push, you can see that because I was touching that knob there, it automatically maps itself to the knob on my push right here, which is really cool. It's pretty magical, actually. So I can just turn this knob here, and I can go through the different sounds. And there you go. So these other knobs here, we're going to talk about these a little bit later. So you can see there's a cable right here. This cable connects these two together. So the sound comes out of my oscillator and into my filter. And the filter here, if I go ahead, let me go ahead and change this tone here. Put it over on the square wave. Okay. And now my cutoff, I can adjust it with the knob because I just clicked on it. And you can see that if the filter is all the way open, it sounds like that. But if I go ahead and close the filter down, I can subtract frequencies off the harmonics. I'm subtracting frequencies off the harmonics right now. This is what we call subtractive synthesis. And this is the basic form of synthesis. And so if you're familiar with old analog synthesizers like from Moog, they're basically subtractive synthesizers. It's what's going on right here. So you can see as I open this up, it gets brighter right there. And we have a couple of different knobs here in our filter that we can mess around with as well. And then if we scroll over here to the right, we're going to see this one is connected to this next one here as well, and this is our amplifier. And the amplifier just makes the sound louder and softer. And that's the basics of synthesis. And if you understand those main building blocks right there, the three main building blocks, it really starts to unlock all the other doors for you. If you really can see how it connects up, because basically all synthesizers are just these three main blocks right here. They just have maybe a few more oscillators, maybe a few more filters, and maybe there's some other cool things you can do with it. But the basics are these right here, which is pretty neat stuff. All right. So here's our different oscillator waveforms. Now this is from a basic analog synthesizer or a basic analog emulation synthesizer. Has these main types of waveforms here. You got sine wave, triangle, square, and sawtooth. And as we go through from start to end, it gets from less harmonics to more harmonics. Whereas with noise, it's just all the harmonic frequencies playing at the same time. So it's just noise. It's just noisy. The more harmonic frequencies you have, the more the filter, which comes later, will affect the sound. For example, if I go here and I put this, if I put this oscillator here to a sine wave, and I click over here on my cutoff frequency, if I hit the note, you notice as I'm adjusting the frequency here on my filter, it's not really doing much. Let me just zoom in so we can see that better. As I adjust this one right here, this knob, you can see it's not really doing much. You can hear it's not really doing much. That's because I've got a sine wave here and my oscillator. If I adjust this sine wave so it's a triangle wave, you can hear a big difference in the sound. And this is a mistake that new producers, new sound engineers oftentimes make when they're starting to explore synthesizers, is they'll put it onto a sine wave and they'll adjust the filter cutoff, and they'll be like, why is my filter not working? My filter's not doing anything. Your filter's doing everything it should be doing, but you're using the wrong waveform. So it's not a problem with the device, it's a problem with you just not understanding how this stuff really works. And Nico says the sine wave only has the fundamental frequency present. That is so true. It's only the fundamental frequency right there. So there's no harmonics to subtract out. So if you want to use your filter and you want to get a lot of bang for your buck with your filter, you have to put it on a brighter waveform for your oscillator. Now, down here in the bottom of the notes, it says the oscillator controls the pitch. The different waveforms have different amounts of harmonic frequencies, and the oscillator controls the pitch, and that's right here. Every oscillator, and they all look different, by the way, and I'm going to show you a couple of these things with different synthesizers in a second, but they all have something like this. They all have some way to control the pitch. So if I'm playing, I can play pitches on my keyboard. Right? But if I adjust the oscillator here, I can go ahead and mess with that there. And it's gonna adjust my pitch for me without playing the keyboard. Now the keyboard, what it does is it locks the different pitches into, it locks like your different keys into specific pitches, which is musical, so we can play it musically like a musician would, scales and stuff like that. But if you just wanted to get some cool sounds going on, you don't need the keyboard. I can just adjust the pitch with a knob right there. And a lot of the earliest synthesizers didn't actually have keyboards. They just had like some kind of way to adjust the pitch, but wasn't actually something that you could control super, super easily. All right. Now, the next part that I want to talk about before we're going to come back to the filter here, because the filter is right here in the middle, but the next part I want to talk about here is our amplifier. Now, the amplifier, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this cable right here. So what I did was I just detached the cable from my gate here, which is from my keyboard. What that means is that now my keyboard will change the pitch, but it will not trigger my sound to go on and off like it just did. In order to make my sound go on and off, what I have to do is I have to actually adjust this knob right here. And you can see, if you look at my screen, you can see I'm actually adjusting the knob on the push here, and I can make the push bigger real quick, like that. See, I'm turning the knob right there, and here you can see what it's moving, and I can make some kind of rhythmic sound. Right? And that's kind of the basic way that we would control our amplifier, how loud or soft it is. And you can just see and hear I'm making it louder and softer. But what if I want to do that with my keyboard? So every time I hit a key on my keyboard, it's going to actually change that on and off. So what I can do is I can just take my gate over here, the gate right here, and just adjust it over here to number A. And now, whenever I hit a note, it turns on that amplifier. It makes the level and the amplifier jump. And if I hit the key harder or softer, it makes it louder or softer. Now, one thing you might notice with this is that it's got a popping sound in the beginning and the end of the note. Hear how it's got a little type of sound? Well, that's because my start and stop point are so suddenly. It's just exactly just as soon as I hit the key and as soon as I let go of the key, it's a super sudden start and stop. And that's going to create this pop sound. In a second, I'm going to show you how to get rid of that popping sound. Its sound is super annoying. It drives me nuts. But don't worry, we're going to get rid of that sound here in just a minute. So what's happening here is the amplifier is responsible for turning the sound generated by the oscillator on and off. It's responsible for making the sound louder and softer. So if I just have my oscillator connected up to my speakers, which I'm not going to do because it's pretty annoying, if I just have my oscillator connected up to my speakers, we're just going to hear constant sound because the oscillator is constantly outputting sound. It's just generating a tone. Do, it's just constantly going on. It's just going forever and ever and ever. And that's not what we want. What we want is we want to be able to start and stop that sound. So what we do is we put an amplifier in the middle here, and this amplifier controls the loudness of the sound. And the amplifier, if we look down here, I've got a little picture of a keyboard here. What that means is that the keyboard connects to the amplifier to control the amplifier. So the oscillator is running the sound through the amplifier. The amplifier is making it louder or softer, and the keyboard is telling it when to make it louder or softer. So it's all these little things that are connected together. And then of course from the amplifier we go into our speakers right here. Okay. So the way this works here with this, and different keyboards are slightly different. You're going to notice that the way it works with the Native Instruments reactor is a little bit different from how other keyboards work. A lot of keyboards, the way the amplifier works is like what I have drawn in this picture right here, which is you set the amplifier for where your maximum output level is, and then the keyboard starts it all the way from 0 and makes it go up to that maximum level there. So if you want the overall sound to be louder, you just turn up your output, which is usually your main volume knob. On a keyboard, that's what would be called the main or volume or something like that. And that's basically just setting up your overall level, how loud that is going to be coming out of the keyboard. And then when you attach your keyboard to it, when you control it with your keyboard, what it's doing is it's starting at 0 and going up to that level wherever you've turned that knob. So that's what is explained right here. The amp level is the max output level. Anything you do to the sound is subtracted from that max level. Now, that is true in most of the cases, but when we're dealing with reactor, as we're dealing with right now, it's actually the opposite of that. So right here, you can see I've got my level here, and if I wanted to, I can just turn that up there, and when I hit the key, it's actually making it louder up from that point. So it's actually the opposite. It's really weird for me to look at this one in Reactor because it literally is just backwards from everything I learned and everything I've seen on most synthesizers. I don't know why they did it like that, but that's how they did it. All right, now let's talk about our filter. So in our filter, there's basically, and this is basic right now, we're talking about just basic filters. The main basic filter that you're going to encounter is the low pass filter. What that means is that all the low frequencies pass through. Okay? So a filter, what it does is it shapes the frequencies of sound by subtracting harmonics. So if I have a low pass filter, let's go ahead and click on my filter here. We can hear that if I turn it down like this, and you can see there's a number there, it says like 28 hertz. It's a number in hertz, and this is our frequencies. So if I take this and pull it up, what you're going to hear is the sound is slowly going to get brighter. It gets brighter, and then I'm going to turn it back down to get darker. What's happening here is all these low frequencies are actually passing through, and as I increase the knob, it's letting more and more high frequencies come through. Okay. Now we can actually see that in action. We can actually see that in action if we go over here and let's put an FM8 on here. An FM8 will allow us to see the frequencies we're messing with here. I'm going to go ahead and turn it off so it's not actually doing anything. I'm going to turn off all these bands here so they're not actually doing anything. And we can see on my screen these gray lines here are telling us the frequencies. So if I go here and go back to Reactor here, there we go. If I take a filter and I tone it all the way down, you can see and hear how it's affecting the sound. Now if I go ahead and turn my cutoff frequency up on my filter, watch what happens to those lines on the EQ. So you can actually see the sound. which is pretty cool. We can actually see exactly the harmonic frequencies that we're affecting there. And so that's how you can see a filter in action right there like that. Now, there are other types of filters besides just a low-pass filter. There's also high-pass, bandpass, and notch. And we can see what each one of these does by these pictures I've drawn for you here. The red line is where the filter is, and the green part here is where which frequencies are actually being passed through it. So with a low pass, we're only hearing the low frequencies. With a high pass, we are hearing the high frequencies. So if I change this to a high pass filter, now you're hearing the high frequencies. See how when I adjust that sound, we hear the low frequencies kind of opening up, getting richer, and the high frequencies has got more of a pinched sound up top. Sounds like a little mosquito or something when I play it at the high frequencies there, or when I open up or when I close off the filter. The next filter here is the band pass, and the band pass is letting the frequencies through that are in the middle here. So if I move it to the left, it's going to be low frequencies. If I move it to the right, it's going to be high frequencies. Let's go ahead and check that out here. There we go. So now if I play this, hear how when I go low, I'm hearing my low frequencies. And as I move up to the higher frequencies, I'm hearing the higher frequencies. Now compare that to my low cutoff. When I go low, it's just letting the low frequencies through. When I change it up to a higher frequency, now we're hearing all the frequencies. It's not cutting out the low frequencies like the band pass did. See, we're hearing all those low frequencies, and you can actually see it in action. You can see what's happening here. Right? And if I go to the high frequency one, high pass, we can see the high frequencies all the time. Right? And if I go to the band pass, now it's going to be sliding through things. Right? So that's how those filters work. And there's another filter in here called the notch or band reject filter, which is actually not, you can't see it or you can't hear it in this, they don't actually have one in this filter here. So not all filters have all these different types of filter types. So a lot of the ones that come with like Moog synthesizers, for example, if you get like a sub 37 or one of the sub fatties or something like that, it only has a low pass filter. Does that mean it's bad? No. Is it limiting? Yeah, it's a bit limiting. But that's what that filter is famous for. It's just a filter that's just designed with that one thing in mind. It does it very, very well. It sounds fantastic, but it only does low pass stuff. It doesn't do high pass, band pass, other things. Right, so with a filter, we have two basic controls. We have the cutoff and we have the resonance or peak. Different keyboards call it different things. Some keyboards call it peak, some keyboards call it resonance. Basically, the cutoff adjusts where the filter will cut the frequencies. So if I go over here and we have a low pass filter, we can see it's getting rid of those frequencies at the top. Now, if I adjust my resonance, we're going to see what happens here is this. See how it puts a little bump right there where the cutoff is, right there. See that little bump right there? It's a little bit hard to see, but I'm going to turn the resonance up and down and show you. If I turn the resonance down, hear this, and now hear this when I turn it back up again. Kind of pokes it through. And if I adjust this, right? And that's what the resonance does. The resonance puts a peak right at the cutoff point. So it just gives it a gain bump. It's just cranking up the gain right there at that cutoff point. So if we look at this here, these images here, we have a low pass filter, two low pass filters here. This one doesn't have any resonance going on, so it's just a smooth drop. And this one has a resonance bump right there, like quite a big one there. Different filters sound different. So, and that might be like, duh, Tony, that sounds very obvious, but different filters sound very, very different. So for example, with Moog type filters, it actually cuts out the low frequency. As you adjust, as you increase the resonance, it actually lessens the low frequencies. So if you want like a big fat bass sound on a Moog synthesizer, you can't have any resonance on it. You have to turn that resonance all the way down for a fatter, bassier sound. This used to drive me nuts because I didn't really understand why these filters would sound so different and how they would, how they reacted differently, because nobody really explained it to me. But you just have to understand that if you're messing with filters and you're adjusting things, you have to be prepared for different filters sound different, and not every filter is going to give you the result that you desire. So if you're kind of messing with a synthesizer and you're trying to get a specific sound, it's just not happening. Maybe you're using the wrong synthesizer, or if you're using modular synthesis, like in Reactor, that's what we're using right now, or another synth, then maybe you've got the wrong filter module in there. Maybe you need to change it out for a different filter module. With this module that I'm using right now for the filter, it actually retains the low end. You can hear the low end is still in there, so it's not actually getting rid of that low end. But I'm going to show you some differences when I get over to my Moog synthesizers and stuff like that in just a minute. One more control with the filters, and some filters have this, some filters do not, is the slope. This filter does not have a slope on it. There's no knob for the slope. And you're going to notice this as well, that different synthesizers have different controls and different things that you can mess with on the synthesizer. And this is it. And if a synthesizer has less stuff, that doesn't make it bad. It just makes it different. Some synthesizers have a lot going on. Some synthesizers have a lot less going on. It's really about the sound that you're trying to create or that you're going for, if you like a synth or not. Sometimes the synthesizers that have less stuff are actually more fun to use because they're not quite as confusing. I really like using basic synthesizers a lot because there's just not as much to get in the way of my brain. Okay, so this filter that we have here does not have cutoff slope. It only has the one slope. But let's take a look here at the notes real quick, and I'm going to explain these. I'm going to show you some other synths that do have a slope. So for example, here we have 3 different types of slope, and the slope determines how quickly the filter cuts off the sound. So for example, if it's a low slope, like around 6 dBs, you're still going to hear quite a lot of the sound above that cutoff frequency point. Medium, like is 12 dBs, it's going to cut off quicker. You're going to hear less of those high frequencies. And then a high, which would be 24 or 48, it's going to be like a wall, and there's just not going to be anything above that point. So let's just take a look at this here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this filter all the way. So we have that sound there. And what I'm going to do here is, instead of using the Reactor filter inside of here, I'm going to go ahead and put Auto Filter on here, which is a filter that comes with Ableton Live. And I'm just going to zoom in on here so we can see what's going on. I have basically 2 different types of slopes here. I've got the 24 and the 12. And if I adjust the frequency, we can see the difference between these, and we can hear it as well. So if I go to 12, it sounds like this. If I go to 24, it sounds like that. It's darker. I haven't touched my cutoff frequency point. I've just adjusted if it's 12 or 24. So with 12, we can hear more of the high frequencies coming through, as opposed to 24, which has less of the high frequencies coming through. And this filter also has different filter types. Here's the notch. That's what that does there, and I can adjust it kind of like a phaser. And then over here, this one actually has a really cool filter type as well. It's like it's like a morphing filter. Where's the morph knob? Morpho is here. There we go. I can morph between different filter types. Pretty cool stuff. So you got, like I said, again, I'm just going to reiterate it. It's different filter types sound different. Nico says 12 is probably 12 dB of reduction per octave and 24, etc. You are absolutely right. That's, yeah, 100%. That's exactly what's happening. So, but they don't all say 12, 24, 6. Some of them say, they go by like poles or like they'll say like filter 1, filter 2, filter 3, filter 4. So you just have to kind of learn what they do. Usually 4 is a more drastic cutoff and 1 is like a less of a cutoff. It's less to more, usually. But like I said, different synthesizers, different filter types are different writings. They have different parameters, all this stuff. So you really just have to learn whatever synth you get and kind of dig into how it works just when you get it. All right, so everything we've talked about so far has to do with the sound itself, and everything is touching the sound. The next part, what we're going to talk about, are modifiers or modulators. These do not actually touch the sound. What they do is they control parameters on the oscillator, the filter, or the amplifier in order to shape the sound or change the sound, but they're not actually directly touching the sound. So the reason why I'm talking about this is because you can have an analog synthesizer that has digital modulation things, like digital modulators, and it's still an analog synthesizer. The reason why they might do this is because digital modulators might like lock in a bit better, might have some more features than an analog modulator. But there are differences to how they sound and how they operate. So different synthesizers are going to have different ones. So you might find like a Moog synthesizer that is fully analog as in terms of the sound structure and the sound, the audio signal path, but it has digital LFOs or digital envelope or something like that, just to kind of lock in a slightly different way. So I don't want you to think that, oh, it's got some digital pieces to it, that means it's not analog. It can still be analog as long as that audio signal path is completely analog. The oscillator, the filter, and the amplifier are all analog, then it's analog. Now with modulation, we have two types of modulators, two main types. There's other ones that have come in the past, like 15, 20 years or whatever, but historically there's two. There's the envelope and the LFO. It is important, what I just said is very, very important. Let me just zoom in here. These do not touch the sound. They modulate parameters associated with the oscillator, amplifier, or filter in order to change the sound. And I've got a little picture down here of how this kind of works. So you can see here we've got our oscillator, filter, amplifier. The sound is the red arrows kind of going through here to our speakers. The LFO and the envelopes live outside of those three main parts. They live outside of the oscillator, the filter, and the amplifier, and they just kind of reach in and adjust things as needed. Okay. So let's start with our envelope, and let's go ahead and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add these in here to this section here. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and open up my browser here in Reactor. I'm going to go ahead and adjust this window here so we can see everything nice. And I'm going to go over here. This is all stuff that you have with the Complete Start. If you downloaded Complete Start and you installed Reactor, then you have these blocks base. And so right in here, we have our ADSR envelope. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this and drag it in, and there it goes, we added it in. Now, this is why modular synthesizers are so cool, is because if you need another module or you need to do something, you can just add it in. If you're working in hardware, modular synthesizers, then you need to go buy the piece that you want. So it's not quite as immediate as it is with the software modular synth. But with the software modular synth, you can pretty much just add it in as you want to go. The only limitations you're really going to have are your computer's processor. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and adjust my amplifier envelope over here. So you've noticed that it's been kind of just, here, let me turn this filter off here. I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to go ahead and click right here. Here it's got that pop sound, right? Well, we don't want that pop sound. Let's get rid of that pop sound. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and make it so the envelope here will help me to get rid of this pop sound. So first of all, I'm going to disconnect the gate from my modulation point here, and I'm going to reconnect my gate to my envelope here. Now gate, what it means is it's just like opening and closing a gate. When I press a key, it opens. When I let go of a key, it closes. It's going from note on or note off messages. So I've got my gate here now. When I hit my keyboard, you can see the light is flashing here, which shows me that I'm hitting my keyboard, but we're not hearing any sound because nothing is connected together yet. I've got the gate connected to my envelope, but the envelope is not connected to my amplifier over here. So let's go ahead and change that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the out of my envelope here. I'm going to drag it here to A. Boom. And now when I did that, let me just disconnect that. You can see nothing is lit up here. I'm going to go ahead and just double click that, put that back to 0. Nothing's lit up here. So if I connect out to A, boom, what happens now is the A becomes highlighted there. And if I click it, now I can say how much is A going to affect my overall level? How much is this envelope here going to affect the level here? So I'm going to go ahead and click and drag it up right here. Boom. And there we go. So now you can see it's affecting it like that. And you can hear what it's doing. Let me go ahead and adjust my cutoff here. It got rid of that pop. And the reason why it got rid of the pop is because my release is not as quick as it was before. Before it was just on off, and now it actually has some shape to it. I can adjust that shape quite a bit. So for example, if I wanted to kind of ease into the sound, like instead of going ah, I want it to go ah, like that, I can do that right here with my attack. Turn that up. I can ease it up. And you can see what's happening over here. If you look at the level in the upper right hand corner of my screen, there it is. Right? If I want to go back to being a fast attack, I can drag this down. If I wanted to make it a slow release, I just click the release and drag it up like this. Right? Now, this is not connected to my cutoff at all. If I wanted to adjust my cutoffs, right? So you can hear how that's happening right there. I'm going to adjust my oscillator type here, the wave, to be a square wave here. Right, cool. Okay, so we got that little sound there. Now, if I hold my note down, it's going to play indefinitely until I let go. That's because my sustain here is all the way up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the sustain, I'm going to drop it all the way down. I'm just going to click on it and drag it all the way down here. And now, if I play and I hold my finger down, it does not play indefinitely. It actually stops really quickly. That's because of my decay time here. My sustain is the level. How loud is that sound going to be if I hold my key down on my keyboard? In this case, I put it all the way to 0, so it's not going to be loud at all. It's going to be back to 0. If I turn it up to about halfway, here there's like a little point on the beginning, and it gets softer real quick. That's because my sustain is now at 50% or thereabouts. Now you hear that little point that's on there? That comes from my decay. What's happening is the sound gets loud in the beginning, and then the decay says how quickly it's going to go from that loud part to my sustain level. So if I want it to be quicker, I can turn my decay down. Do you notice that? There's like a little point on the beginning. Right? If I turn this up, that point becomes longer. Right? So if I wanted to get rid of that entirely, let's make this into some kind of like an 808 bass type of sound. A lot of people know the term 808. They've heard the term 808. All their favorite people have talked about 808s are so cool and stuff like that. But what does it mean to be an 808? Well, an 808 kick drum is a kick drum from the 808 drum machine, and it has this like boom type of sound. It kind of like has like a decent amount of hang time on it. There we go. Right? There we go, cool. So we got like a pretty cool little sound there. Let me go ahead and turn my cutoff down a little bit more. Okay, what I'm gonna do, and this is something I like to do a lot, is when I'm kind of tweaking my sound, making my sound, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and record in a little line here. Okay, cool. Let's record that in. Put one more note in there. Yeah, I think I like that better. Cool. Okay. I'm just going to make them all the same loudness level here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, while this is playing here, we can go ahead and shape the sound a little bit. I can make this shorter. And you notice that I didn't touch my notes that I've just recorded at all. I'm actually just doing this by adjusting my envelope here. Cool. Now, maybe what we want to do is put a little point on the beginning of everything with our harmonic frequencies. Oh, I'm sorry, Nico. I'll hit that guy up and I'll invite him back to help you, make you famous. So this filter here, I'm just going to double click on this filter and name it, not filter, sorry, envelope, amp envelope, boom. And let's go ahead and just name these as well. Oscillator, filter, amplifier, or just call it amp. And what I'm going to do is I've got my amp envelope. The reason why I named it is because I want to make another envelope in here. And I'll make the second envelope, I'm just going to reorder these like this. There we go. And the second envelope, I'm going to call it filter envelope. And you can notice I'm abbreviating everything, and the reason why I'm doing that is just to make it easier to read stuff. Now, what I want to have happen is I want this filter envelope to trigger when I trigger my keyboard. So I'm going to grab from my gate right here and drag it down to this one that says gate. This is an output, this is an input. The outputs are on the left, the outputs on the right, the inputs are on the left. And this envelope here, see how my filter has the A and the B here, just like my amplifier does. Well, I'm going to go from my output here to my A, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to click on this A here, and with my filter amount, I'm going to go ahead and turn it up like this. And now you can hear every time it triggers that note, it's adjusting my filter here. There we go. Cool. And I can adjust this more or less. Just give it a little bump on the beginning of each note. Just a little bit. Nice. Right? And so you can see that these envelopes here, I'm not really doing a whole lot with them, but a little bit goes a long way with these. So I've got let's just go ahead and explore what I've got going on right now real quick. I've got my oscillator, my filter, and my amplifier. The sound is traveling through here, and these down here, my modulators, are just controlling some parameters up here. And I've got them controlling A on this one here is my level, and then A over here is my cutoff amount here. Now, let's go ahead and take this and add one more thing into this, and that's going to be a LFO. And the LFO is similar to an envelope where it's going to control a certain parameter. But what this LFO it does is, instead of just happening when I trigger the keyboard, it's just going to keep going. And it's just like an oscillator where it just kind of, it makes a waveform, but the waveform is going so slowly that we can't hear it, and instead we can use it to control things. And that's literally what LFO stands for. LFO stands for low frequency oscillator, which is pretty cool stuff. Here's what we do. I'm going to go ahead and get my output. Let's assign this to the A over here in my oscillator. And let's assign it to the pitch. So I'm going to click on A. I'm going to assign it to the pitch here. Let's go ahead and hit play. Click and drag it in. See how that's moving my pitch here? And you can hear it's like wreaking havoc with the pitch of my thing that I just played. Okay, so let's take it off the pitch here. Let's have it adjust our wave shape. I'm going to adjust my wave shape down. There we go. Let's make it a little bit faster with my rate here. Cool, right? I'm going to adjust this one here to make it a little bit. Yeah, I think that's a really cool sound right there. What's happening is that it's adjusting. You can see it kind of flipping back and forth here. It's actually adjusting what waveform my oscillator is playing. And you can do all kinds of stuff like this. You're not really locked into what something can control, especially with a modular synth like this. Now, this is what makes certain synthesizers different from other ones, is how much control your parameters, your modulation sources can control, how many different destinations. Some of them are super basic, and some of them are a lot more open-ended, so you can control a lot of things. And that's what kind of made Massive famous. That's what made Serum famous, things like that. Especially Massive back in the day. It really had like almost open-ended control with lots of modulation parameters. So you were able to do a lot with it. Obviously, the more you can do with it, the more complex you can make your sounds, which is good and bad. It makes it a bit harder to kind of wrap your head around, but it also makes it, you know, there's a lot more possibilities that you can get. So it's really kind of up to you how much you want to get. Just because you have all the potential there doesn't mean you have to use it all. You can still have like a really complex synth like Massive and do basic stuff with it, which sounds really good. So let's just go back into our notes here. Now let's talk a little bit about what we just did here. The ADSR is the envelope, attack, decay, sustain, release. That's what ADSR stands for. What happens is when you press a note, a key on your keyboard, a note on message is sent, and when you release it, a note off message is sent. The envelope is what happens from the time you press the key to the time you release it, and a little bit after. So let's just look. I have a picture here of this. And this is this drawing, it may look pretty basic, but it really explains everything. And this is a drawing that I wish somebody had walked me through back in the beginning, because it took me a long time to really wrap my head around what envelopes were doing, just because I really needed somebody to kind of sit down and explain it to me in these super basic terms. And every article I read or every book that I read about it didn't really break it down into just stupid terms. They kept the nerd terms going, and I couldn't deal with the nerd terms at the time. So what we have here is our note on and our note off. When I press the key, ba, I release it like that, ba, ba, like that. So that's the length of the note as I'm holding it down. So I put the note on and I let go here, note off. During that time, all this stuff happens. So our attack and decay have to do with how loud the note is in the very beginning. So remember, before we talked about our amplifier has that level that we go up to, right? That level that we get to, that's our max level right there. That is 100%. Whatever that is 100%. If it's here, it's 100%. If it's here, it's 100%. If it's here, it's 100%. That's the maximum level that our sound can get to. So that's 100%. Silence is 0%. We're starting at silence. So right now, if I hit a key on my keyboard, right, we're starting at 0, and it gets loud and it tapers off. Right? That's what's happening. So we start here at silence, and I press the key. When I press the key, the sound immediately wants to go to 100%. It wants to go up to its full value. Well, that's our attack, how long it takes to get there. If it's a fast attack, if it's a low number, the number is a low number, a fast attack, it's going to get there quicker. So if I go back here to Ableton Live, I'm going to go in here to our amp envelope. Let's go to our amp envelope here. I'm going to go ahead and stop this one from moving around. And here's our amp envelope right here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this, turn that off as well. Okay, cool. So we got that sound there. If I put the sustain all the way up, the decay and here I'm going to put the release and everything, all this stuff all the way down. Now we're starting from blank basically. There's our sound. What happens is if I have my sustain all the way up, that's 100%. So nothing I do to my decay is going to matter here, because what the decay is saying is how long it takes to get from 100% to our sustain level. If the sustain level is 100%, there's nothing to do. So go back over here, and if I want to hear some difference, I'm going to turn my sustain level down to, let's say, 50%. Now if I want it to go from loud and soft gradually, that's my decay level, is how long it takes to get from that 100% to that sustain level. If I wanted to take time to go from 0 to 100%, I'm going to adjust my attack here. So we can see here it takes about a second to get to 100%. If I click on this, you can see we're at 1 second, 1.07 seconds. That's what that sounds like. If I put my sustain all the way up, it just takes 1 second to get to fully open. But if I put my sustain down, now it's going to curve over like a mountain over my attack and my decay. It's going to look more like this right here. Whoa. It's going to take a little bit of time to get back to that 50%. If I have my decay all the way down, it's just going to get to that attack and immediately go to my sustain level. Hear that? It gets loud and then it suddenly drops down. And we can hear more gradual. I can make it real. I mean, this goes up to like, I think, yeah, 10 seconds. So I'm not going to do that because that's going to be annoying. But let's put it at 2 seconds. If you double click on it, it goes back to its default position. So try not to double click. Okay. Nice. Real gradual. Everything's like really gentle and gradual with this, okay? So if I wanted to make some kind of stringy type sounds or whatever, now you can hear this almost sounds like a reversed sound. It sounds like a backwards sound. And the reason why it sounds backwards is because my release is still here all the way down low. So if I take my release and put it up, now what's going to happen is at the end of the note, when I let go, it's going to take time to go back to 0. So the release happens when I trigger the note off. When I let go, that's when the release starts, and it's like how long it takes to get back to 0. So let's just go over this. Let me just play this for you. Cool, right? So if I play. And there you go. You can see, you kind of hear how that works. And if we look at this picture here, you can see how it works. The attack, the decay, the attack starts off from silence. It gets up to 100%. The decay goes to wherever the sustain is. If the sustain is at 100%, you're not going to hear the decay do anything. And if the sustain is anything less than 100%, you're going to hear it ramp down either quickly or slowly. And then when you let go of the key, that release kicks in and it tells it how long it's going to take to get back to 0. Sanchez, the video is available to check out later, absolutely, on my YouTube page, and I'll put that link up on my Twitch page. I should do that. Okay, so that's basically the LFO and the envelope here. That's the envelope. Let's just go into the LFO real quick and just kind of talk about the LFO. The LFO is a low frequency oscillator. It's just a really slow oscillator. That's all it is, just a really slow oscillator. In a past life, the LFO was actually a real oscillator, or maybe it's an oscillator that hasn't grown up yet. I don't know, but it's just the same thing as a regular oscillator. It's just going so slowly that we can't hear it. So the scientists or the people who developed synthesizers back in the day were like, you know what, we can't hear it, but we can use it for something, and that is for controlling different parameters. So they usually include the same waveforms as a normal oscillator: sine, triangle, square, saw, all that type of stuff there. There are a couple different controls for the LFO. The frequency, which is the rate, how fast it is. Sync, which would connect it up to your tempo of your song. Retrigger restarts the LFO every time you press the key. Those are our main controls for an LFO. So let's go ahead and take a look real quick at this one. So I've got it connected right now to my oscillator. I'm going to change that so we can hear it more. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and I'll drag it over here to B. Whoops. LFO, yep, output, go to B here, and I'm going to go to B. I'm going to click on B up here in my filter, and I'm going to have it adjust my cutoff of my filter. So as soon as I turn that up right there, we can see it kind of goes back and forth, and I can adjust how fast it goes back and forth by clicking on my frequency here, and on my push, I can adjust that frequency. So if I go ahead and play this, I'm going to adjust my envelope here so it's not doing quite as much sloping and stuff like that. There we go. Oh wait, let me click on this one here. There we go. So I can make it faster and slower. So you can do stuff like that, and you have like real-time control over this, which is awesome. It's super, super cool. And this is where synthesizers, how they work. I mean, this is the great thing about synthesizers. You have like, I mean, I don't have anything really here right now. It's just an oscillator, a filter, an amplifier, a couple of envelopes, and an LFO. It's really very, very basic, but you can hear the sounds are pretty darn cool. Nico. Oh man, yeah, I know, because I know you're already into synthesizers anyway. I know you got that guitar. I mean, when I see you next time, I expect that to be a keytar hanging on your wall behind you. Hot. It's getting chilly now, so I'm making tea again. Try not to burn my mouth. All right, so this is the basics of this stuff here. Let's just take a look. I just want to go ahead and close out this routing and stuff like this. How do you connect the modulation sources to their destinations? Well, different synthesizers handle the routing in different ways. Really what you need to do is you need to read the instructions on your synth, or you need to, you know, just kind of, after you get to know enough of them, it's really not like, it's not too hard, but you just kind of have to know what you're doing. Nico about to become the fresh synth-beller. So some synthesizers do it differently. Sometimes the source will have menus to select the destination. Sometimes the destination will have a modulation knob on it. It just depends on the synth type. And we're going to look at some different synthesizers after the break here in a minute. Some synthesizers have a modulation matrix, so it has the mod source, LFO envelope, and then it has a destination and it has an amount, and it's like usually a grid or something like that. And the destination might say oscillator pitch, filter, frequency, amplifier, stuff like that. And then it has the amount, which is how much the source affects the destination. The source in this, like if here, this example here, the source would be an LFO, the destination would be a pitch, and the amount would be like that much. Oftentimes, the trickiest part of understanding a synthesizer is learning how it does modulation. And after the break, we're going to talk about a few different types of synthesizers. I'm going to go through a little history of synthesizers, kind of starting from older ones to more modern ones. We're going to look at a few different ones, and we're going to show how all this stuff kind of comes together. All right, so let's do this. Let's go ahead and take a few minutes break. Let's say, I don't know, like 10, what do you want? 5 or 10 minutes, what do you want? 5 or 10 minutes break here. And in the meantime, while you're letting me know, we're gonna go ahead and pull this music back up. So you have some nice music to chill to. Speaking of synthesizers, so we can watch our pandas